Hello and welcome to the Author's Anvil. This channel puts out educational content around writing and storytelling, but also includes video essays about random topics that I want to share with the world. This is such a video, and today I want to talk about a character who I think might be the most tragic villain that Batman has to face. Sorry, I'll see myself out. While definitely a fan favourite and popular among writers, I think people don't fully appreciate the depth of Harvey Dent and Two-Face. True, there are many Batman villains who could definitely take the most tragic award, notably Mr. Freeze or Killer Croc, but in this essay I will make the case that it is indeed Two-Face who deserves the top spot. I'm John, and this is my exploration of Harvey Dent and Two-Face. So let's start with the character overview. Two-Face first appeared in Detective Comics number 66 in 1942 as Harvey Kent. Yes, his surname used to have a K instead of a D, until later on when DC decided that they didn't want a villain to have the same surname as their poster boy. He was created by Bill Finger and drawn by Bob Kane, though of course with Bob Kane we can never be 100% sure how much he was actually involved. Anyway, Harvey Kent was Gotham's handsome district attorney who dedicated himself to ridding the city of corruption and villainy through the legal system. Unfortunately, this all changes for Harvey though when the mob boss Sal Maroni throws acid at his face during a court case. The left side of Harvey's face becomes hideously scarred and mutated, and upon being shunned by society and his fiancée for his appearance, he goes insane and the crime persona of Two-Face emerges. Like a lot of early comic stories, this origin was a little weak, and at first Two-Face was kinda goofy with his whole gimmick of committing duality-based crimes, but in later decades, this character would be reworked and expanded upon to become the interesting villain we know him as today. In later stories, Harvey's backstory was a lot more tragic. He was physically abused by his father, who used to flip a lucky coin to determine how and when he'd beat his son. Harvey would repress these memories and develop dissociative identity disorder, which he kept hidden not only from those around him, but from himself as well. When he became disfigured, his descent into crime was not only driven by the shunning of his fiancée in society, but also out of a sense of twisted justice as he wanted to punish those who had wronged him. The repressed personality of his trauma took over, and thus he became Two-Face. The character's dual personality is depicted usually as either being a split personality disorder, where Harvey and Two-Face fight for control over the body, or as a twisted blend of both. I actually have no preference about these two interpretations. I think they both bring something unique and interesting to the table. When we have split personality stories, we have that added tension of not knowing when Harvey will turn back into Two-Face, and we can tell really interesting stories where the two personalities even have different memories. Some Batman stories, for example, have Harvey knowing Batman's true identity, whilst having Two-Face not knowing it, and things like that. When the two personalities are blended, however, we get a tragic, and perhaps more realistic, look at a man who has become the most twisted and bitter version of himself. This version of Two-Face is someone whose entire worldview has been flipped upside down, hacked to pieces, and then stitched very poorly back together. It's pretty tragic stuff, that. But anyway, let's have a quick look at what Two-Face brings as a challenge to Batman. Two-Face may not have powers, but as Harvey Dent he is charismatic and cunning, while his darker half is merciless and brutal, the perfect mix to be a terrifying crime boss. Harvey's knowledge of the legal system also helps him to navigate his career out of jail, and gives him a unique insight into the society that he now terrorizes. Thanks to additional training by Deathstroke, he is known to be skilled with firearms and is also a decent hand-to-hand combatant, with his Two-Face personality often becoming enraged to the point of ignoring pain and pushing his physical self to its utmost limits. At first glance, Two-Face's theme and character is admittedly quite on the nose. The whole concept of duality and being obsessed with the number 2 is made abundantly clear with his wardrobe choice and the way he speaks.
Two-Face, you douchebag! You didn't get an invite!
I know, but this is the second meeting you guys haven't invited me to, and it's not fair!
But there is something deeper here, I promise. Harvey's background in the legal industry gives us another layer to this idea of duality, the black and white concept of right and wrong. Harvey and Two-Face are obsessed with the idea of fairness and justice, and this is what I think traps him in his never-ending cycle of madness. We're going to talk more about this later in the philosophy section of this video, but just thought I'd give it a quick highlight here. So, with a good grounding of the character out of the way, I'd now like to explain why I think Two-Face is such an interesting and tragic villain for Batman specifically. I think often the most compelling villains in fiction are the ones who have pre-established connections and relationships to the hero. The classic is of course Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father, spoilers by the way, but others I'd like to shout out would be Griffith from Berserk, King Bethod from the First Law trilogy, and Bill from Kill Bill. Having a villain that they have a personal connection to often heightens the stakes and motivations for the hero, gives them a stronger call to adventure, which thus makes the hero themselves more compelling for the audience. So what's Batman's connection to Two-Face? Well, Harvey's relationship with Batman varies depending on the writer, with some stories showing a grudging tolerance towards the vigilante and others showing enthusiastic cooperation. Quite consistently in stories, however, he is shown to have a very friendly relationship with Bruce Wayne, with even some stories going so far as to making them childhood friends. When Harvey therefore descends into the dark path of crime, it is a really tragic moment for Batman, as he's lost a partner and a friend. He has to see a man who he once respected now become the thing that he used to fight so hard against. In a lot of Batman stories, his hunt for Two-Face is usually motivated by a desire to rehabilitate his friend. He still desperately tries to find the kind-hearted Harvey amongst the monster of Two-Face. But in nearly every instance, even with plastic surgery and therapy, it seems that Harvey always relapses, and Batman has to lose his friend all over again. This is again pretty tragic if you ask me. Quick side note that isn't necessarily to do with their relationship, but more about what their characters represent, but I also find it interesting how Harvey represents the way that lawful justice should be enacted. Courtrooms, a fair trial, and a prosecution from an officially tendered lawyer and jury. Despite being a white knight for this system, he is unfortunately often ineffective at bringing people to justice, and pays a terrible price for his altruism. Batman, the Dark Knight, on the other hand, is a vigilante and works outside of the legal system, yet he's often the one who defeats the villains and keeps his sanity. It is up to us as the audience to decide which one of their methods is better for protecting society, but regardless, when these two characters are written well, the contrast in their methods of delivering justice show a cynical critique of the Western legal system, a further tragic element to add to Two-Face's story. Two-Face is not only a constant source of pain and guilt for Batman, but he's also a stark reminder about how close Batman himself is to the darker path. If the once great Harvey Dent can cross the villainous line because of just, as the Joker would say, one bad day, then that means the traumatized, edgy, lonesome Bruce Wayne is surely at risk as well. The presence of Two-Face really heightens the tension then for Batman, as we're constantly wondering about if or when the Caped Crusader is going to snap like Harvey did. While many of Batman's villains have a connection to him or Bruce Wayne, it is Two-Face that cuts the deepest, and with this deep cut comes the opportunity for some gut-wrenching tragedy. So it's time we talked about Two-Face's coin and his philosophy on justice. The iconic coin that Two-Face has is his former good luck charm from when he was in law. It is a two-headed silver dollar which has one side that's defaced. He flips it to not only help him make decisions, but more importantly to decide the fates of those he administers justice to. Let's think about the implications of this. Actually, let's let Aaron Eckhart explain it to us.
The world is cruel, and the only morality in a cruel world is chance. Unbiased, unprejudiced, fair.
I think what makes Two-Face so interesting here is his underlying desire to escape from nihilism. Nihilism being the school of thought where one believes that objective truth and morality do not exist. I am of course simplifying this massively, and I would encourage you to explore this branch of philosophy further, but rest assured that it can be quite a frightening and depressing belief system when you first come across it, and the idea of there being no good and evil can, but not always, lead some people down to some truly dark paths. For someone like Harvey then, who has spent his entire working life fighting in the legal system where justice and good are supposed to prevail, having something as horrific as his disfigurement happen to him when he was trying to do the right thing must be absolutely soul-destroying. Many nihilists like the Joker would claim that what happened to him means nothing, and that he shouldn't have had those naive beliefs in the first place. But given Harvey's character and his backstory of childhood trauma, the idea of thinking those bad things were not really bad things, but just things that happened, is a pill I think is too hard for him to swallow. I believe then that Two-Face uses his coin as a way of escaping from that nihilism. He can no longer believe in the lawful justice system, as he was literally wronged in that environment so terribly, but he also can't bring himself to believe in a world without some kind of order to it. He finds that order then in the simple flip of a coin. In a twisted way, he's kinda right. Chance is completely unbiased, unprejudiced, and fair. If we flipped coins to try and condemn criminals, we wouldn't have to worry about racism, sexism, and any of that bad stuff. There's no complexity or existential nightmare that is associated with heads or tails. You can administer justice instantly with no chance of the guilty wriggling out of legal loopholes or being saved by corrupt politicians. The tragedy here, of course, is that Two-Face is wrong though. Chance may be simple and unbiased, but it also leaves no room for context. Whether we like it or not, morality is complex and should be taken very much on a case-by-case basis. We might say that killing someone is unequivocally wrong, but then there is definitely the case to be made for mercy killing or killing out of self-defense. Regardless, justice is not as black and white as Two-Face wants it to be, and his mental instability has caused him to take his escape from nihilism into the utmost extreme. And what he of course doesn't realise is that his method of administering justice is not free from human influence, because his literal use of the coin is an ethical decision made by a human, himself. We could go super deep into ethics and free will versus determinism, but that is really not the point of this video. What I hope I've highlighted though is that the character of Two-Face brings up these philosophical questions, and I think it's really neat when you have a villain that can make you think deeply about this kind of stuff. So the last section of this video is going to be a wrap up of this character with the framing of highlighting just how ridiculously tragic Two-Face is. As I said before, Batman's rogues gallery is filled with understandable and tragic characters, but I genuinely think Two-Face takes the cake for the following reasons. We talked earlier about Harvey's abusive childhood, which is tragic and horrible in itself, but I just wanted to make an extended point about the fact that the Two-Face persona is almost definitely a manifestation of that repressed trauma and abuse. What's really dark here is that Harvey's father lives on in Two-Face. He carries and uses a lucky coin just like his father did, and now hurts people the same way his father did as well. Harvey failed to move past his trauma, and now the pain that he suffered is being carried on to a whole slew of people. The only positive thing we can draw from this is that the story of Two-Face is a cautionary tale against repressing trauma and mental illness in ourselves and in society. Harvey grew up in an impoverished household that couldn't afford therapy or counselling services, and when he eventually could afford them, then he'd unfortunately buried the pain so deep that he no longer realised it was there. Maybe if the support had been available to him when he needed it, we would never have gotten Two-Face. Two-Face is one of Batman's most grounded and realistic villains. He's not a mutated crocodile, or a cackling psycho clown, or an insanely attractive plant lady, but instead he's just a regular working class guy who had his face and sanity destroyed by a mob boss and then was rejected by society because of his disfigurement. I said earlier that Two-Face was a constant reminder of how Batman teeters on the edge of losing his sanity, but I actually think he's also a constant reminder to the audience about how close any of us can be to becoming a monster. However Harvey's disfigurement is depicted, it is always a horrible and agonising experience which, in real life, would be a trauma that he would carry for the rest of his life. It also doesn't help that this pain is on the most noticeable part of the human body. No matter how confident we might be, I think it's human nature for us to care about how others look at us, even if it's just a little. The idea of having something so prominent and irreversible happening to your face, especially when you were perceived to have been conventionally attractive before, can be understandably really upsetting. I'd like to play you a clip from one of my favourite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, which still gives me nightmares to this day. You know the one I'm talking about, the episode where Harvey becomes Two-Face and he sees himself in the mirror for the first time. I'm giving headphone users here a 3-second warning. 3, 2, 1... Massive props to the voice actor Richard Mull for traumatising an entire generation of kids there. But in all seriousness, there is something so gut-wrenching about a person looking in the mirror and seeing something so different to what they were before. And then to make it worse, you see your loved ones be frightened by you, and the society who you spent so many years trying to protect start to reject you. There are so many stories where Batman, Bruce Wayne, and others try to rehabilitate Two-Face, but pretty much every time they fail because of bad circumstances, another villain twisting the strings, or just plain bad luck. It really seems as though Two-Face can't ever catch a break, and I know that comic characters, especially villains, in a meta sense, often stay static or are reimagined in a different storyline, but damn it do I think that if there's one guy who deserves true redemption the most, it's Harvey Dent. In his twisted way, he just wants order, justice, and to be loved and accepted by people again. But due to the level of trauma and pain that he's been through, it seems unlikely that he'll ever get that. So we've talked extensively about who Harvey Dent was and who Two-Face is, and with that all in mind, I think we've made a pretty good case to say how tragic he is. Obviously, to make a more thorough case for how he's the most tragic, we'd need to examine all of Batman's other villains and compare them to him, and while I would love to do that, I only have finite time. And honestly, I would love to see all of you make the case for me. If you think there's another villain who takes the cake, then please comment down below. Maybe I'll highlight the most persuasive response in my next video. For the time being though, I just want to hammer home once again how grounded, understandable, and well, human Two-Face is, and that is why he's so tragic. He's the villain that shows the ugly side of humanity and makes us wonder how close we are to becoming a monster, which makes him not only terrifying but also tragic. This was quite a heavy video for me to make. If you got here, then thank you very much for your attention and time. It really means a lot. I also want to give a big thank you to everyone who has watched, commented, and supported my Superman video. I'm still blown away by the numbers and positive feedback, and genuinely never expected it to get above 100 views, so thanks. It has kind of made me think about doing this whole YouTube thing more. I guess we'll see how this video does. Anyway, you should totally check out my other content. I know it's boring educational and philosophical stuff, but if you have any interest in writing or storytelling, then you might find something useful in there. Quick shout out once again to my friend Jobe, who served yet again as another pair of eyes on this script. I really enjoyed making this video, and you can be rest assured that I have many more things that I want to share with this world, so stay tuned. Though I must say that I am getting married this week, so apologies if for the next couple of weeks I might be a little bit delayed while I enjoy my married life. But anyways, thanks again so much for watching, really hope you have a great day, and keep writing.